Oh, you guys had to clap for a long time.
Yes, it was.
It was a lot of clapping. We were over there and they started clapping.
Yeah, we were. We had a long walk, and I'm like, I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think they're going to pull it off.
You guys really went way longer than I thought you were going to. As stand-ups, I think we can appreciate that usually it tapers off before we reach the mic.
Isn't that always funny in stand-up when you're at a club and it just dies out?
Oh, yeah.
And the stand-up is still coming.
Totally. Yeah. Although it does give you something to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that's the first lesson you learn in stand-up is it's polite to not. It's usually to be polite, you would just be like, "Thank you," but a stand-up goes like, "You couldn't keep clapping for 5 fucking seconds," and then you're off.
I always think it's hilarious too the way of stand-up. Some stand-ups just hit the stage blasting, and others are just taking their time. Like I'm gonna find out where the water goes.
They situate themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
That's me.
So
I'm
funny.
a situator.
You are.
I take my sweet ass time.
Which is kind of a power move.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The desperate play is to go up and be like, "Hi, everybody!" and then what you get sometimes are the people that come up big. They're like, "What's going on?" And then their act is very mild.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, what was all
You're
that?
like,
What's
you just
going on?
love using the space.
Yeah. You just had too much coffee and you're nervous.
But you, both the ladies, take their time all the time. What about you, Zach?
I don't do stand-up, so I have no idea what anyone is talking about.
Ultimate
Zach,
power
if you wouldn't
move.
mind waiting outside.
I'm going to weigh in on all the stand-ups.
Don't even perform.
He's so secure in who he is. He doesn't do stand-up. He does more improv. And you were in Spider-Man Homecoming.
That's true, but no one has ever applauded me for that.
That's true.
So I can't relate.
But you deserved it.
You did deserve it.
I agree.
Now, Crashing season 2, which is always great to get to the season 2 this Sunday night.
Yeah.
This Sunday night. But how does it feel different this year compared to the first season?
The show or
Yeah,
me
the show.
internally?
Yeah.
The mystery of my inner world or the
Yeah.
show? I love second seasons of shows, and there's a reason for it. I think the first season you're laying a lot of pipe. Pipe is a is that a fancy term I just used? I can't even tell.
It's a fancy term for having sex with women.
Yeah.
With toothbrush juice.
In a writer's room, it means pipe means something will go down this later. Usually sex with a woman.
Yeah.
No, it's like all the characters are established. The world is established, and you can kind of hit the ground running. So I think the second season is, I can confidently say it's way funnier.
Right.
And it doesn't have that expository quality. I love our first season. I'm very proud of it, but we really kind of crank it up a notch the second time around.
And it also feels like you're bringing in even more New York comics, like people are comfortable. I think one of the great things about the show is that all of a sudden you're at home, you're watching the show, and then there's a few minutes of Greer Barnes, and you're like, "Oh, this is great."
Yeah,
and then you move, but to have that moment of just getting something really hot, by a comic.
I was always one of those guys that liked the seasons of Seinfeld where he did material.
Right.
And when they stopped doing it, I was like, what happened there?
Yeah.
And with our show, we get so many great comics. You get to see some of Attell, you get to see some Artie not for no reason, but it's not in service of the story. Here's 5 minutes of Greer just being really, really funny.
Yeah.
And this season you get to see Jamie Lee and Sema Parna and no Zach
Zach whatsoever.
He's asking for a suggestion for a space.
Any occupation.
Yeah.
Any occupation.
An occupation that I might be bad at.
Yeah.
Doctor? Okay.
Now, and I'll ask the ladies this, because the show is, of course, about starting as a stand-up, but is that a different experience for women than it is for a guy starting a stand-up?
No,
it's the same.
I think I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like when I was starting out, people would tell me it's harder for women, but I don't think I was feeling it consciously because I was just so focused on trying to be decent at stand-up, which is like enough of a feat in and of itself.
They meant growing a mustache.
Yeah.
It's harder for women. Not impossible. Have you met my
mine's quite thick, actually. I just cover it up with a lot of concealer. It looks really good. But yeah, I think that was the bigger challenge. And then now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, there were some really weird moments.
Right. But when you're starting, you don't realize that because it's your
You have nothing to
default.
compare it
It's
to.
your
Yeah.
only normal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you don't have anything anything else. So.
Yeah, I don't even think it's comedically different, but wouldn't it be different if the main character was a woman crashing on people's couches? It would suddenly become a much more dangerous show.
Yeah,
you know?
maybe. Unfortunately, that could be. That's
Also, I would
interesting.
never sleep on someone's couch. Gross.
Yeah. What if it's just covered in pillows, colorful pillows, throw pillows?
Then maybe.
Women love pillows. If I know, I've
Maybe.
been
I'll
married
consider
twice.
it.
Women love pillows.
Yeah, we've all seen the show.
Pillows.
Yes, that's true.
Now you're also getting a little more into the alt scene this year, which is, I think that most people who just catch stand-up on TV have no idea how different those two scenes are.
That's what was fun about it is when we went in to tell HBO what the second season would be about, it was about dating a comedian. Pete, my character, dates a comedian. And it's also about the nuance between the club scene and what you just said, the alt scene. And then I said to Casey Bloys, I was like, is that too inside baseball to talk about? Because it's not that different. Like most people don't know that it's almost like the dwarves and the elves. It's like a fantasy world. It's the same stuff, but if you don't care about fantasy, you don't care about the nuance. And they were like, the more inside baseball you can be, the better. So we start exploring that, like Pete, and this is what happened in my real life. I would go up at clubs and not do very well. But then if I was performing in a laundromat, suddenly like I was great. Like it was more of my scene. It was more of my
people.
My people, the references. We say it on the show. It's something that it's like these are the people that got made fun of in high school, as opposed to the people who made fun of people in high school, which is a broad distinction. Obviously, there's crossover acts that do both. I am a crossover act that does both, but there's something a little bit gentler and nicer about the alt scene, which gives you, like Maria Bamford would be like a good example. Even Sarah Silverman, who does clubs, kind of thrived in that. I don't want to say it's more listening, but there is more of like it's comedy nerds. It's not people there to get drunk and there just happens to be stand-up and who cares. They're kind of like auteurs, you know, and they know what might be hack and they know what's overplayed and overdone. So you're playing for these kids that used to memorize the SNL monologue, you know what I mean? These were like real fans.
Well, there's that facet of the alt scene, but then there's also the like ambush comedy show where you end up just going up. They like put an amp and a mic at like the front of some sports bar. And then they like turn off the TVs and everyone who was there to watch the game is like, sorry, what? And then you just start doing stand up. I did so many of those when I was starting out. I don't know what that's definitely, it's just like, I don't know if it's alternative comedy, but it's alternative to comedy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like so
It's
not
alternative
how it
to a
should be.
quiet dinner.
Yeah, exactly.
You should have been
it's just like
enjoying
this
that.
weird bastardized type of show.
Oh yeah, it's not.
There's a lot of them in New York.
It's not a flip of a switch like suddenly it's great. I mean, there's a whole separate happens to a lot of guests.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a whole separate struggle to that scene as well, which we explore, which is really, really fun.
But a lot of club comics do not even like the alt scene.
Yeah, that's certainly the world that I'm trying to portray, especially when I was starting. People really looked down on it and they thought it was very, very, very stupid and a waste of time. I used to like leave the Boston Comedy Club to do a spot at Rafifi. Rafifi was the spot on 11th Street on the Lower East Side that was, in my mind, the coolest place you could go. And everyone thought it was insane that I would leave a club, a paid spot at a real club to go to what was a bar that had like a video store in the back. But it was at a bar with a video store in the back that Comedy Central first saw me and I got my first kind of breaks. And then that's when you started seeing some of those people change their mind about the alt scene.
How did you even find out about that scene? Who said?
It was Dimitri Martin. I was barking at the boss and Dimitri came by. It was actually two people, Dimitri and Jim Gaffigan. Jim Gaffigan came to the Boston and I had opened for him on the road. And I remember we rode the F train home and we went past my stop so I could keep talking to him. That's kind of like a classic New York thing to just be like, yeah, I'm getting off at Broadway Lafayette. Just because I was getting such good advice. And I remember how he phrased it. He said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but you should be in the alt scene. And he's like, you're going to follow like a pet psychic and a woman with a ukulele, and it's going to be really bad at times. And we show that on the show. Yeah. I'm actually really proud. In the second season of Crashing, we're not just like, everybody's great. It's like you see some really garbage alt people, because there are just as many garbage alt people as there are hacks in the club scene. In fact, I would say the club scene doesn't even have anybody as weak as our weakest. You know what I mean? Like the weakest alt person, the weakest club person is still stronger probably than the weakest, than one of the mid-level alt people, meaning chops alone.
Yeah,
I'm talking about mic technique and like how you doing, and someone drops a glass. Like they have that nailed.
I think that the alt scene is just it's sort of like a womb. It really is like an incubator of like, you know, you're safe here, say, you know, be yourself. And I think in the club scene there is like an intimidation factor, and I think it weeds out the people that you're talking about, because you would literally be like, I can't survive here, bye.
But the truth is that you need both.
Yeah, you do.
I look at the alt scene as cardio and the club scene as weightlifting. I don't do either of those things. But this guy's in really good shape, too. He understands what I'm saying.
He's literally busting out of his suit.
I know. There's a lot of like strong guys that aren't fast, but then the alt scene, which I identify more with a little bit, we have a lot of fast guys who aren't very strong. And you really do have to make sure you're not becoming too inside to lose the people that are just coming in from Rockford, Illinois. And you don't want to be too broad that you lose the guy that, you know, really loved Call Me By Your Name or whatever.
Would an alt audience be intimidated by a David Tell or a Rich Voss suddenly coming in there and doing crowd work? And...
I think maybe back in the day, it's changing a little bit.
It's changing. There was a real divide when I first started.
And that's kind of what we're showing on the show. It's a little bit of a regression on the show. I'm sorry, Jamie.
Oh, no. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you say it?
No. Okay. But yeah, I think when I first started out, I feel like there was a lot of talk of like alt versus club, and like club people won't go to the alt scene, and alt people hate club scene. And then there also was this weird divide, bringing it back to improv, of like, you know, like improv and stand up. Fair enough. But like that also, I feel like, you know, I would hear improvisers be like, oh, I could never do stand-up. And then, you know, stand-ups would be like, oh, I have no interest in improv. And now I feel like everybody just kind of grew together.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's kind of like a lovely thing where I'm like, oh, we're all doing this.
It's all becoming comedy. But even as like...
and it always was. But for some reason, there was like this weird, like, rivalry Game of Thrones thing happening.
I'm telling you now, there's an alliance between the dwarves and the elves.
I just used the reference. Was the reference correct at all?
I don't watch that show either.
Oh, okay. Great.
I don't do shows with realms. Anytime someone's like, that won't work in this realm, I'm like,
no realms.
No, thank you. And why in all those shows, even things that I do watch, like Lord of the Rings, which I like, why are they all like, well, it's a magical fake place, but they all have British accents?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, we think it's so whimsical. It's just a place.
They should make up an accent.
That's what I'm saying. It should be a different accent.
They should have a dialect coach figure out like an accent that's never been touched.
Well, that would be great if they all had Brooklyn accents.
Yeah. Hey, I'm on my dragon over here. I got to be head of a witch over here. That's Brooklyn, right?
Yes, it used to be Brooklyn. I don't know what it is anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, I love your ring.
Yeah.
It's a really nice ring.
I'm buying a ring over here.
Is that ring, is it fair trade diamond?
Oh my God, you're hilarious.
Now, I don't want to step on what's happening this season, but there is a love thing going on, or at least...
Laying pipe?
Yes, laying pipe takes
That really
place.
is a term in the writer's room, I swear to God.
No, the thing is, you never heard either term?
No, I'm just...
That's hilarious.
But you guys have to play more than friends.
Yeah. Pete,
Yes.
my character dates a comedian.
Yeah.
Which is what I did in real life. Was after my wife left, you kind of date, you're like, well, it didn't work to date a non-comedian. Maybe it's the best of both worlds to date someone who really understands the lifestyle. And Jamie plays that character whose name is Allie.
Allie Reeson.
Allie Reeson.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you start out in stand-up, you're so enchanted by the fact that you're finally meeting people who get you on a level that you didn't even realize existed.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to be like, oh, well, like, why wouldn't I date another comedian? Like, we both have the exact same schedules, the exact same hobbies. But then it can be like weird and competitive and complicated, and you're both kind of going for the same thing, even though you're not. It's just, it gets messy.
It's like you're holding, comedians kind of always have like a card behind their back. I was going to say a knife, but it's not that.
Yeah.
It's not that dramatic or vengeful or violent. It's just like you kind of know the whole relationship that there's this other thing which is you're starting out in your career and you're always a little bit worried that like, because you know you're a comedy addict and they're a comedy addict, and it's great that you can hang out and date each other and cancel dinner to do a show and nobody cares because they would do it to you. But you also kind of know that it's like The Good Son when she's holding Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood, who's in their 30s. And the problem is I think comedy is Elijah Wood. Spoiler. So you're both, you can love each other and be in a nice place, but you know, like you're not, no regular people, no like stable people, completely stable people are like, I want to do a job where people clap before I've done anything. You know what I mean? Which is what we do. We go on stage and we're like, yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Like,
wow,
that's
when
insane.
you break it down like that, I'm like, oh, God,
it's insane.
with me?
It's insane.
It's insane.
But that's why, you know, I think we all dabble in dating comics. Most people I know tend to move on. Like my wife is not a comedian, and neither is yours. He's an improviser.
Oh, uniting the
That's her
realms.
joke.
That's my joke.
I stole her joke to make fun of her husband. That is a BLT.
No,
right
he does.
there.
Yeah, he does stand up.
No,
now
he's
as well,
great.
and
He's hilarious.
We
He's
love him.
hilarious.
Now, Zach, they do say that improv tends
Dan
to
Black,
be more
everybody. Dan Black.
supportive of each other, though, than stand-ups are.
I think in some ways that's true, just because like the whole attitude of improv is yes and just like supporting each other. And also when you first start out doing improv, everyone is so bad that you have to pretend to laugh at each other. And that kind of just like keeps going forever.
Whereas with stand-ups, I think they love to see their friends crash and burn. You love to see your friends have a rough time.
Yeah, for sure. Because we've all been there.
Yeah, and we're all terrible when we start too.
Yeah.
And that's where the ball breaking comes in, I think.
And that is the madness of this, is it doesn't make sense. I mean, a lot of people go, my parents didn't want me to do that, is because, yes, your parents have seen life, and the odds of someone making it to become a stand-up, it's a long shot.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's getting better and better. If it's a good thing, it's getting better and better. If it's a bad thing, it's getting worse and worse. Becoming a comedian. Because I remember when Seinfeld started, he would talk about there were no comedians. There were like troubadours and nightclub acts that went up between burlesque people. And if they wanted to do stand-up, they had to go up in between like jazz musicians or something in some like speakeasy. And that was just the goal. They just wanted to like be people that got on stage. Obviously, then they make success. And then when I start, they make success. What am I, Balky? And obviously they make success. They lay pipe and make success. It's okay to do, never mind. Listen. But then like, so when I decided to become a comedian, that was a thing. Like I knew of other comedians. Right. They might not have been like superstars, but now even more so, is there's so many opportunities and different ways to make it. Not to say that it's not really, really difficult and something to like go into kind of thoughtfully, but you can be a YouTube star. You could be a Snapchat king, or is it wizard? We don't know. What I'm saying is you can have a podcast. There's like all these different outlets for
and very
comedy.
few of them you make money at, though. Very few of those you can say, okay, here's a even lower middle class living. You're either really struggling or suddenly you're on,
well, comedy is like
crashing.
Skateboarding.
Yeah.
I've never seen an okay skateboarder.
Right.
It's like you're either Tony Hawk making millions or you can't land a trick. Like I've never seen a kid on the street land a trick.
Yeah.
The board always lands face up.
I'd never heard this before, but you're correct.
Right?
You are right.
And then overnight, it's like, that kid's amazing and he's sponsored. That can happen. Although I don't know. I don't want to act like I can represent the kind of the class behind us age-wise, but I think some of them are experiencing, there's more shows, there's more need for writers, there's more respect for comedy. Like it seems, wouldn't you say?
I feel like there's a lot more opportunity.
They all
now.
have like 9 Netflix specials, like they're 14. And I'm like, when I was your age, I was handing out flyers. And they're like, whatever, Pops. And then he
Skateboards
tries
away.
to skateboard away.
And then falls.
But
when you watch this show, do you see this as you, or do you see it as the kind of the Pete character.
I think it's becoming less of me.
I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Because I watched the season. And I'm really hoping that
Some
isn't
things
all
are
you.
real. Some
Yeah.
things are real. We were talking about like in the show, Pete has sex for the first time with someone who's not his wife, and before it happens, he says, "Do you want to have sex?" And that is ripped right from my life. Like I'm happy to tell that story. Is that most stories I see about guys, especially married guys, whose wives leave them, the next scene is a 20-minute montage of them like in jacuzzis and like rolling around with random people and like, well, I'm getting some strange. And I'm like, that's not my experience, and that's not a lot of people. Yeah, strange. I haven't heard that one in a while.
I like how you raised the roof. Just for the listeners, Pete straight up raised the roof when he said strange.
I believe I did raise the roof, Jamie. It was a successful roof raise. But what I'm saying is, I'm happy to represent a lot of the more awkward, regular people whose, when your wife leaves, you go into a cocoon and you don't trust anybody and you don't know how to flirt with anybody. You're not like magically good at it. So that's where some of that like over sweetness of like, are you sure you want to do it? Because this is a big deal to me. And yeah.
Well, there's time that Pete is over sweet, and at other times that he's really taking from people, some of the people around him. And it's there's plenty, I think, in this show for being as funny as it is there's plenty of tough things to watch at the same time.
Well, that's what when I interview people on my podcast, like I like talking to like Mike Birbiglia or Jim Gaffigan or any of these guys that like are really nice and sweet white men, only white men. My podcast is called Only White Men.
It's doing great.
It's surprisingly soaring. Soaring. No. We have a lot of diversity. Zach hasn't done it, but everybody else has done it. Listen, what was I saying?
I didn't mean to derail you.
No, it's okay.
Well, you're saying about sweet white guys, they're going to have some...
Oh, I like uncovering that ambition because we all have it. And that's one of the things that Crashing is about is like, and my character is certainly less in touch with himself than I am, meaning he really is trying to convince everybody that he's just sweet, nice, and doesn't want any trouble. But every stand-up at some point, if you find that soft spot, it has a little bit of a killer instinct that at least he's upset when someone else gets something that he wanted. He might not say anything, but we like to explore where are the limits of this guy's persona, because it is a persona. Nobody's that nice all the time, and he needs to figure out how to be a three-dimensional person. And I will say that my relationship with Allie, it really... that helps.
Kind of cracks it open.
She's with somebody who's not buying it fully. And I think that's really fun. And because she's a comic, she can poke holes in me, as opposed to most of the time, I think people are too polite to do it. Comedians just constantly go right for the jugular, even when you're dating. Maybe especially when you're dating.
And are comedians very open about exposing their dark side, even if they're only coming on? Because there was a scene with John Mulaney, who I'm like, oh, that was pretty bold of him to go that deep, that dark.
Well, we like to find ways to take the sweeter guys and have them be assholes.
Yeah.
Which is, I think John was excited to do that, and he played it so well. And that's more like John and I's relationship, is we like to joke that way with each other, which was super duper fun. But I think the good comedians, wouldn't you agree, are the ones that do the work. I think that's why we like roasts. Like season 2, there's a story about roasting each other and what roasts are about. And I think one of them is, it's like, if you're not going to do the work yourself as a comedian, the hard looking and the deep digging, then we'll do it for you. You know what I mean? You're a blowhard and an ass. And an embarrassment to the community. Yeah, I only insult in 1930s. You get some strange, you blow hard. But that's a big thing. When you say like, the better the comedian, the more three-dimensional of an idea of who they are they have.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I think that's something that you uncover the longer you do it. Because I feel like when I was starting out, I was like, oh, I can write a joke, but I have no clue who I am on stage. Like, I don't know how I'm perceived. I don't have a persona.
Yeah.
I was just like,
I feel like you're learning a lot of that when you're starting. It's like,
and then as you go along, and why I think comedians who are like more veteran are usually more funny, it's because they just know themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, they have the ability and the joke writing and all that, but they also just know who they are.
Right.
maybe more important than even the joke
And
writing.
you kind of realize that later. I don't want to speak for everyone. I realized that later where I was like, oh, you can just like be a person. Like
I
just
would
try
say-
just talking and being a person on stage.
Totally. I'm looking more for a joke that sounds like me more than I'm looking for a joke that would just kill.
Right.
Right.
And I was only focused on killing.
Oh, we
at
both
first.
were.
Yeah.
I would write jokes and I'm just like, that just works.
Right.
Like, that's a good joke.
Right. If I'm like, oh, someone like another type of person should be saying this, I would
Right.
still say it. I would like
That's what
I would
I'm
like
saying.
reverse engineer a setup just to be able to use the joke, even
Right.
though if it was a complete lie. I'm a sociopath.
Yeah. You're really learning a lot
No,
about your
yeah.
demons today. What is the deficit in you that drew you to this? And now you're a TV star.
Oh God.
Well, you were already on, what was it? MTV's Bootylicious? Or
Yeah, I
something?
was on Bootylicious. Peace, y'all. No, I was on Girl Code.
Girl Code. That's not even close
Nope.
to Bootylicious.
Not at all.
Girl Code is interesting and Guy Code because they put a lot of people on TV before they're ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they'll be like, oh, you've done these shows. Now you're going to go out for a tour and they don't have the material yet, you know?
Yeah, it was yes, that definitely happened. Because colleges especially wanted to book us because the whole student body was like, we just want to see them. And then you
Right.
get there and you kind of realize you didn't even really need to be doing stand up. You could kind of just like talk to the students
Yes.
and like do a Q&A like this and they would have been psyched.
Right.
But-
Best Week Ever was just like that too.
Yeah.
We would go out and there'd be improvisers like you, Zach, and they'd just, I remember Jess St. Clair would just go out and read from a romance novel.
Did they love it?
And they loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I, no, not that Jess wasn't trying, but I was like, why am I putting all this effort in? I could have just been like, you guys think about last week? You see Hulk Hogan's boner showed up during one of the matches. Take a few photos,
Yeah.
go home.
Catch that sweet, sweet check and lay on your pillow like Ferris Bueller.
True dat.
Well, you know, there's.
Am I allowed to say true dat? Is
Yes,
that
you
like,
are.
Is that
You
like a
can
cool
bring
thing to
them
say?
back.
No,
Raise
we're
the
going to pull
roof.
that.
True
You don't
that.
have to worry.
Okay,
That's
thank you,
already
thank you.
edited.
Please
We're
take
editing
that
in
out.
real time. So much of what you said is already gone, Pete.
True dat?
True. Unless it comes back.
It
Who
could come
knows?
back. We could bring it back.
But you know, when we're talking about like who comedians, some comedians will spend too much time talking about, I don't know whether they're bald or they're not happy. But I think what Aparna did was coming out with the depression stuff. And I think that's the most vulnerable anyone could be. Was that something that was easy for you to jump into because you knew it? Or were you like, it took a while to get it out there?
I mean, I didn't start talking about mental health stuff till a few years in, and I think it is like Jamie was saying, where you have to sort of get comfortable enough on stage to be like, oh, I can sort of talk to them just like I'm a person and like address things that are real from my life that might not necessarily seem funny right away. But I think if you're like intimate with certain issues that seem dark to other people, you can kind of bring them in with a familiarity they might not otherwise
Sure.
have with it. So I think that makes it easier to approach from a more maybe lighthearted perspective.
And it's the exact opposite of being self-indulgent. I think that's why a lot of people just wanted to talk about, oh, I can't date, and you're just like, enough about you. Pick up a paper. But when I think what you did, people in the audience could go, oh shit, no one talks about this, and this is kind of funny. You know, most things you can find a funny spot with it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some of the greatest comedians are also some of the darkest. So I think there's like lots of room to mine, I think, some of the more morbid and grotesque thoughts that we have as people. Because I think everyone has.
Sure.
them.
It makes people feel so much less alone, which already is sort of the thing I love about comedy, is that it makes you like when you hear other people,
Right.
you're like, oh, I'm not crazy. You also think that.
Yeah.
So I think the deeper comedians can go, usually like the more cathartic it is for someone listening.
I think that's why standing by Artie and then presenting that, Artie Lang, as honestly as you did this year, and I'm recovering addict myself, and I thought that he was amazing, but you also get to see what that behavior does to everybody around him, including him. Like,
Yeah.
he's not happy being Artie, and it's not it's not fun, but there are parts of it that are very, very funny.
Yeah.
You can't get around that.
I don't think anybody's better. Last time we did this, Artie was here.
Yes.
I was just thinking about that. Nobody's better at making you laugh at something that's so painful.
Terrible. Yeah.
Than Artie.
Yeah.
And we were in an interesting situation. Obviously, Artie's been in the news, and obviously we love Artie very much. So in the second season, we were like, okay, we want to keep working with Artie. But the only thing we want to talk about is what's going on. Like, we need to deal with this behind the camera. And then it turned out in front of the camera as well. What's it like when someone you love doesn't seem ready? Hopefully he is. He's in treatment right now. But when we shot the episodes, we were just dealing with somebody that didn't have any intention to stop. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it has to come from them.
Sure.
Artie has thousands of people, but then the close people to him as well. He's got a pretty deep bench of people that love him and care for him and give him the real talk and give him the hard-nosed sort of stuff. But it's slippery. It's something he tried to explain it to me, like he was like, it's like telling me not to breathe, is what he was saying about not doing heroin. And I was like, all right, man, if you're okay with it, can we talk about how to deal with this on the show? And Judd was very good at this. We breached the subject with him. Artie, no surprise, was all about it. Anything he could do to get people to see how painful it is and to not start, because that's really what he wishes that he could do, is not start now that he's kind of stuck in it. And then the strange thing about it is it's almost like role play therapy. Like I lovingly tell Artie how I want him to be well, but in the show, we get to like have fights where we're improvising and I'm just saying to him what I never otherwise would have had the courage to say because it's in the scene. I was like, sorry, Artie, this is the scene where I've had it with you and I yell at you, but you also yell at me.
Yeah.
It was very emotional. We're getting worked up in between takes where it's a fight. And in between takes, we're like hugging each other and just being like, I love you so much, because you don't want to. But he said, like me with my divorce, it's not the same at all. But I found it therapeutic to role play these scenes that were inspired by the heartbreak of my life. And Artie told me that he experienced the same thing that I did, which was you almost start seeing yourself as a character. It's like depersonalizing, where you go, oh yeah, this helps me understand how other people might feel. And oh yeah, this helps me, hopefully, I can't say that, speak for Artie, but hopefully this shows me what maybe I should be doing. Because you go, that guy's in trouble. You know what I mean? Yeah. You read the script and you go, this guy's in trouble. Oh shit, this is based on me. It's my hope that would help. And based on some conversations with him, it seems to have at least given perspective.
Well, he also, and again, it's the Pete character, but he also knows how to find a young Pete. He also knows how to find the kid who, hey, by helping out this addict and driving him places, maybe I can move into stuff. So he kind of abuses you in the way of saying, hey, look what you get out of this.
Right.
And, even when there's something you want to do, so you get to MC this. Right. And that
Artie's always trying to show Pete how he's down and dirty too.
Right. Yeah. And it's strange to see that kind of stuff in this show. Yeah. And it's only because for whatever reason, the first year you won it, Artie, and now you're dealing like everybody that loves Artie with Artie.
I mean, I would say this if Artie was here. It's a conversation when you're like, okay, the pilot, who's it going to be? Judd and I loved Artie. And it wasn't so much that we talked about it. We were just like, there's an are we doing this moment? Because not just, forget show business. You're becoming involved in somebody's life. And there's a lot of people whose strategy with people like Artie is to not get too close. Yeah. And you're like, this is going to make us friends, close friends. Yeah. And that's a risk. I hate to say it, but it's a risk that somebody might hurt you or let you down. And I know he feels that way too. He texts all his gratitude to be able to do the show and that we haven't abandoned him or anything. And nobody wants to abandon him.
It is pretty amazing that's where we are with drugs and alcohol now. Whereas maybe even 10 years ago, the network would have said, sorry, this doesn't.
Yeah, HBO deserves some credit there too.
But I've actually even heard from people, hey, you can't keep him propped up. This is to have any success. is the worst thing for Artie. And there is
you know what I say to that?
Yeah.
He told me what he makes from his podcast. I was like, we're not buying him more than a sandwich. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like comparatively, I shit my pants when he told me what he makes on his podcast. It's a joke between us.
Yeah. But Artie,
I'm like, fuck you.
yeah, Artie has never done poorly in terms of his business. He's always,
No, I know.
he's always.
That's not to say these people don't have a point or whatever,
Yeah.
but he is doing well.
Right. But I have been with him when he's been loaded and kind of have fallen asleep and still just nailing line after line after line. He's so funny.
I think that's what makes our heart hurt.
Yeah.
Is like, it's like there's talent and other people have so much of it. And that's almost like a bond. It's
Right.
like we both have talent in our veins and you have so much of it. And that's one of the things that Pete talks about is like, who do you owe? You've been given this gift. And it hurts it's almost like a prodigy situation. It's like, you got to be playing the piano. Please don't retreat into yourself.
I think we also got really lucky because the Artie is obviously on the show, but our very Artie heavy episode, I would say, was also directed by Gillian Robespierre, who is such an intuitive, kind genius. And
Yeah. She did Landline and Obvious Child.
She did Landline, Obvious Child, and she's just awesome. And I feel like she was the perfect person to have work on that type of episode without giving too much away.
And that was the only time when we would be FaceTiming. There's the cameras and then there's Video Village where you see what the cameras are seeing. And we would be FaceTiming Judd to watch the takes because Judd was so personally invested in this. The whole episode was Judd's brilliant idea. And I really hope people, appreciate Artie for it. I hope it's a special thing.
Well, first of all, this is amazing because it didn't occur to me that who directed that episode, that you forget with TV, with movies, we give all the credit to the director. And with TV, we forget all the time. But yeah,
I actually didn't like that you mentioned her.
Yeah. But it is such a fragile thing.
Who wrote it?
Yeah. When that was over, did you feel like we got it, or does it take editing before you're like, we're happy with this?
Shooting is like getting a lot of bricks, and then editing is building the house, and we're getting better at it. Meaning first season, there were times when I was like, I don't know if there's a house here. Second season, we didn't stop shooting until we knew we could at least build a shitty house. At least it'll have a roof. You know what I mean? Maybe no pipe.
Well, we got to raise that roof.
We got to raise that roof. We got to lay that pipe. Wow, this interview is imploding on itself.
None of this will air. Don't worry. None of this.
But you don't know. There's what you feel. There were takes, like especially with something emotional like Artie, there were takes that like I was feeling more. And sometimes that's not right for the show.
Yeah.
Like that's what Jed is so amazing at, is he picks the moments. He'll help with the edit and he'll be like, let's see a different take here or whatever. So it really is collaborative in that way.
There's other things I love in the show. One thing that happens when you hop on stage with a couple real master comedians and you're not at that point yet.
Yeah.
And that's what's always funny about stand-up to me, is that when you start and you're here in New York, you can be working on your 5 minutes and you're right next to some of the most brilliant people who've ever done this. And why doesn't that force people to quit? Why would you go, I'm just learning to walk and there's Jesse Owens running by me? What sense does this make?
Right. I think that's one of the reasons why stand-ups get better faster than writers. And I'm a writer and a stand-up, but it's like there's no risk of pain, no risk of immediate pain when you're writing. There's risk of immediate pain with stand-up. And I think because there's wolves surrounding you, that you just get a little snappier faster because of that threat.
I think that's why a lot of stand-ups who start to become writers like really enter that like staff writing world, a lot of them stop doing stand-up because I think that they don't have to feel that pain anymore. It's not that you're not being criticized or people aren't judging your work, but it's definitely more of a process of like, okay, well, there's a second draft and a third draft, and you just lose that in stand up.
And people are helping.
Yeah, it's
like
a
you make a
staff.
joke and someone goes like, "Oh, I could do this."
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
There's like a real editing process. So I think that's probably why they're like, oh, this is way more comfortable.
Yeah.
The scene you're talking about is my character goes up with Artie and Dave Attell late at night, how they do sometimes. And what's interesting, one of the quotes I love that I kind of keep in mind while we're making Crashing is that a lot of comedians, when they start out, make the mistake of being funnier off stage than they are on. And I think that's a mistake that Pete is making. So he goes up drunk, and I think it was edited out, but he was on drugs. I think that scene was taken out. But anyway, he's out of his mind a little bit. And he goes up and does really well, not really well, but better than he normally does, to hint that there's something that he's not tapping into, whether it be confidence from a relationship or alcohol or whatever it might be. When he gets out of his own way, he's better than what we've seen.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of lays the idea that Pete is going to hopefully progress. It's never going to, I always say it's not going to turn into Entourage. I don't think our show is going to be like season 4, he's just made it. And now it's just like, what do you mean the Ubers don't have Teslas? It's not that. I think it's always going to be a struggle, because that's what stand-up is. It's like these micro achievements, like a little achievement here, a little achievement here. And that's what real life is, as opposed to a lot of shows about stand-up we've seen where they're already successful. I like showing Pete get a little success, then losing a lot of success, then getting a little bit more, because that's what it feels like for 15 years. And then you get to sit with nice people and talk about your show, if you're lucky.
But, it does also... If you're doing this, you should have been really funny with your friends first, and then you go on stage after being and start going, "What's the deal with?" Suddenly you're not yourself.
Yeah.
You're attempting to act like a stand-up, and it's such a frustrating, crazy process.
That happens a lot of times, I think, with openers and stuff, because you see people that are maybe 10 years behind you.
Yeah.
And my opener was amazing, but we would talk about how to bring the dying laughing in the rental car onto the stage. And it was fun to see him do it. His name was Chris Thayer.
Yeah.
He's a really funny guy. But it's a hard thing to do, especially a character like mine who's religious. He doesn't want to swear. He doesn't want to talk about sex and all these things. But then off stage, he does swear off stage. And that was true. That's what I was doing. I was being a fuller person off stage. And if that's the case, then I would say you're doing it wrong. In the rare exception of like Stephen Wright or these types of guys that aren't in the business of the full extraction.
Well, talking about religion, there's a thing with Penn Jillette where Penn is just talking about his own thing, and it shakes your faith. But I did an hour with Penn one time sitting here, and a friend of mine who I'd known for, 25 years just became an atheist during the show.
Yeah.
Just went, wow.
He's like the Jesus of atheists.
He is. Where he just went like this.
All you have to do is touch the hem of his garment and you'll stop believing.
But he does make sense, and he seems comfortable when he's saying it. He's coming from a comfortable place.
I love it. That's a good word, comfortable.
And it's really, really interesting because it's respectful the way he talks about atheism. But you're one of the few people who kind of put your faith out there, I believe.
Yeah, but Penn just did my podcast. It'll be out this Wednesday. And we're actually going to play the extended version of the scene from the first episode where he kind of lays out why he's an atheist. And we agree on almost everything. We just have different definitions of God.
Yes.
If you're very liberal with your definition of God, meaning like the conspiracy of molecules, what makes you and me, and spawned the universe and erupted the Big Bang and gave us consciousness, then Penn believes in that. You know what I'm saying? He's a very gorgeous atheist. He's a very open atheist. He doesn't believe in God, but he'll tell you, he's like, I don't know that there isn't a God. I just don't think the evidence supports that there is one. So you know what I'm saying? Like, as opposed to a lot of people that really dig in the idea, no, there's no God, and you're a fool. Penn is the first atheist, or maybe one of the few atheists I know, that is so calm, so comfortable, and so loving and open, and just being like, we talked for 2.5 hours, and he was like, we disagree, but it was like very open. It never clenched up. It never got to that like, well, if you want to believe in fairy tales, there was none of that. We just found all this common ground and different vocabulary. You know what I mean? If you want to call what erupted into this the singularity, because there was a single point of mass. With it contained the elements that would one day be that jacket, would one day be my heart, and would one day be the air that we're breathing. You can call that the singularity. That's what materialists call it. That's what science calls it. I might call it awareness, and I might call it God. Turns out we believe in the same thing. We both are saying the data we have, here's how I swirl it around, here's how you swirl it around. But when we have compassionate listening and discourse, comfortable, patient discourse, you can find that even somebody who's famous for being an atheist and someone like me who really loves kind of dabbling in all different traditions have a lot more in common. And that's why I was so excited. He was like the only person on the list. I was like, I want Pete to have his faith shook, but I don't want it to be what you're expecting. Right. I don't want it to be like, well, the Bible was written 150 years after the death of Christ. That's not what converts people to atheism. Yeah. Somebody's saying like, listen to what Penn says. Right. He's like, if you need a book to tell you not to murder and rape, you have bigger problems than religion. Like you know what I mean? He's really convincing.
But that's so interesting too, because the show would have been totally different if you would have had Ricky Gervais in
I love
spot.
Ricky Gervais, but I never would have had Ricky Gervais in that spot. I'm a big fan of his work, and I don't even think he's a fool or anything. I just think the way he comes at it more of a rascal. He's more of a like, well, that's nonsense, isn't it? Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, that's fun when you're already an atheist, but if God is a personal thing. And if you want to like really kind of soften somebody's hold, not necessarily on theism, but on your God, it actually comes through a loving conversation, I think. And that's what makes Penn so effective.
Yeah, he is incredibly effective. And again, we're talking about a show about stand-up comedy, and look at all the places that you're able to go with it.
But isn't it funny, you know, I was talking about Kumail Nanjiani in his movie The Big Sick. The first 15 years of our careers, we all stay away from the things that people kind of want us to talk about. I was a Christian doing stand-up. People are like, well, you should talk about that. And you don't. You talk about bath soap and stuff. And Kumail's from Pakistan. He didn't talk about it. And then when your number comes in, or the big opportunity comes, whether it be a movie or a TV show, you go, okay, I'm good enough now that I can go back and tell the story of what it's like being a Christian. That's like a weird secret you have.
Yeah.
It's a weird feeling to be at a table with people who make a lot of like really off-color jokes, race jokes, sex jokes, and you're just sitting there going like, I took a pledge in front of my family not to talk this way.
Sure. That's
more interesting to me. That's what I hope makes Crashing tick as a story, is it's a guy trying to reconcile how he was raised and the authentic response he had to how he was raised, and how is he going to navigate that into adulthood? Because there's your childish faith, and then there's the second half of your life. Second half of your life is up for grabs. You know what I mean? In most parts of the world. And it's interesting to watch Pete try and navigate what is going to be his ongoing morality.
And it's also true that your material, your act does affect the people in your life, the people that are willing to say stuff about their family. That also works better with experience, doesn't it? That also is something that's tough to do with any elegance when you're 21, 22 years old.
I didn't know anything was weird about my family.
Yeah.
I really just thought it's like you were saying, it was it was this interview. You guys didn't know it was different to be females.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Obviously, there's some physical differences, but I'm just saying it was your experience. Similarly, I bet you look back now on your parents and go like, that was some funny stuff. But when you were going through it, you were just like, I guess dad's drink scope.
Just drink it down.
I don't know.
But it's also the difficulty that we've always had in writing for either, if it's a white guy writing for women or another race, they're like, well, he doesn't do that very well. Why would he? You know what I mean? What really changes things is when you have creators in that field, not just people trying to, to perform that idea. So that's, and I'm thinking that because I was watching the other night where are all the great women directors? Well, you got to just have a bunch before you get to the great ones.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. White men have had a real racket.
Yeah.
We've just been like, let's swarm it. Let's send them 300.
Yeah.
And then we get 3 great ones, and we're like, we're the best.
Say look.
We're the best.
Take a look at Albert Brooks. That's us. We did it.
297 schlubs that nobody's heard about, but 3 great ones. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But hopefully we're seeing some difference there. We had several female directors, minority writers, I hate the word minority. You know what I mean. Non-white males.
Minority around here, a lot of places they're majority.
Exactly. The original majority.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do you hope to see this going? You said you don't want to see him go on and get his own late night show.
What I love about it is that every potential season, there's another secret underbelly of stand-up that hasn't been explored at all. And I can't believe with so much content in this time, 2018, that there's still, given a lot of shows about stand-up, there's still stuff that no one's talked about. In our show, it's not just the alt scene, it's also, or handing out flyers or whatever it might be in the first season. Second season, we talk about the college market and how you have to go to these sort of like weird auction feeling things where you have to do 10 minutes of clean material at 9 a.m. for a bunch of student activity nerds, and you have to be clean and all this stuff, and like just how much crow you have to eat just to get the privilege of spending 6 months on the road, not talking to another person, driving between Dakotas, trying to string together a living. I'm like, I haven't seen it. And I'm thrilled that we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Because the third season could potentially explore the solitude of the road and what it's like coming back to New York and everything's changed. If you leave New York for 6 months and come back, the club that's your home club is probably closed.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
It's
And
true.
like some of your friends have quit, and some of your friends have made it, and everything's different. Like the comedy scene is always fluctuating. And I think that's really exciting to consider. What will it be like when Pete is touring? What will it be like if Pete is trying to get a writing job? What if Pete goes to LA? There's always another step, because it takes 15 years to make it. And you have to make it about 15 times. That's what I think my character is figuring out.
I think what's great about this too, it takes 15 years to make it. And then, like, within 3 weeks, you're trying to get headshots. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
they're so
The open
quickly.
mic
There's a
with the
lot of
business
like
cards.
cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I gotta get a website, and it's like, who's gonna click on that? No one, not even you. Like, you don't need that. You just need to be decent.
There were guys that had websites that like tried to, almost like a snow job. They had like videos of like, I know I have a lot of terminology. It's because I read books from the 60s. It's like, they're trying to make it seem like they have fans, like fake videos of them like signing autographs and stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck? And, but that's what I love about stand-up is it's not always fair. But when I see John Mulaney, who I think is our best stand-up, like from our crop, and maybe even considering the other crops, he's just the greatest. When he sells out 6 nights at Radio City and he had a failed sitcom, you're like, yeah, if you're great at stand-up, people will find out and you're going to do fine. You're going to do great. That's incredible. That's like Chappelle level.
Yeah.
I mean, Chappelle did a lot more, but you know what I'm saying? So I like telling this story of like, it is kind of show busy, but it's a different branch of show business where Pete can go and Ali and Aparna can grind it out and make a living. And
there's no center to it like there are other businesses. Like you bring it up, him, John selling out 6 nights, but it doesn't mean your neighbor has ever heard of him.
Right.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean your neighbor has ever heard of Bill Burr.
Yeah.
And that's always shocking.
No, I know.
When you're around.
Which is why
comedy.
you're never too comfortable. Talk about Bill Burr. I remember he's maybe my favorite comic. I just think he's incredible. And a friend of mine was at like some horrible hustler corporate show, and there were like ice sculptures of tits and stuff. And there's Bill Burr in the corner doing an hour.
Yeah.
And it's only going as well as it can go when people are eating fucking finger sandwiches shaped like dicks. And you're like, yep, stand up never plateaus completely. I mean, you can go to the Comedy Cellar tonight and someone amazing like Kevin Hart might not be able to find it. I just picked him randomly, but I'm just like a famous, amazing comic might not be able to find it.
But
and that's
you're
what
right.
makes it endlessly compelling.
You're right. Kevin Hart's not good. So that's good that we nailed that.
If we could make clickbait out of this, I'd like to start beef with Kevin Hart.
But I think it's actually true for the whole entertainment industry. It's like we're in this time where you can never be too comfortable. Nothing you do guarantees any certain outcome. And I think it's actually a good thing, because I think it's now everyone's like, what does it mean to be famous? What does it mean to have attention on you? Is it going to go away in 5 seconds, or am I going to last? Like, I think it actually makes you focus and just pursue the stuff you actually care about, because you truly cannot control any other outcome. It's the only thing that you can actually like puppeteer and make your own.
And that's what I see in common with a lot of the people who have made it. They didn't get in it to be famous. They didn't get in it to get rich or get laid. They did it because they had an itch that they had to do stand-up. It might be a compulsion. It might be unhealthy, but they wanted to do it. They needed to do it. And that's where you get Mulaney. That's where you get Bill Burr, Brian Regan, Nick Kroll, Maria Bamford. That's where those people are hiding.
And I do want to say this. This is the best acting Bill Burr has ever done.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, there are parts of it that he is so Irish scary in this that you're like, well, I hope he doesn't kill Pete.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you really...
We wanted to write a scary thing for him and a funny thing for him.
And he just... and I've seen him do other acting, and he's always great, but there's something about him in this...
I really appreciate that.
In this season.
Bill Burr was one of the first people I opened for in Peoria, Illinois, which is funny because there's an old showbiz adage, which is, will it play in Peoria? Because Peoria is such like a staple of regular America. It's where Richard Pryor's from. And I opened for him there. And then like, here we are 10 years later, he's on our show. It was such a thrill to have him. And he's my favorite. And to give him the space to riff, he riffed, we fuck around a lot, and he was terrifying.
Yeah.
I think people are going to love that one.
Yeah, I think it's... and again, it's one of those places that we talked about. There's so many spots for you to go with this show.
Big J's on it.
Big J
just walked by.
Okerson,
He's on the show.
Get him to swing in real quick, because he will...
Somebody hasn't said pussy in a while.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see if we can find the most offensive thing that he can say within 18 seconds.
It sounds like he's not coming.
But yeah, that is, he is one of those guys that in New York City, you see him have just these amazing sets. And then the next night, he's got to win it all over again.
Totally.
And I don't know if there's another art form like that. I mean, I'm sure you feel
can't
that
tell. I'm sure Neil Diamond on a Sunday night is like, man, Saturday they were throwing their drawers at me. And then on Sunday, because there's all this music, you know what I mean? Comedians, this is a Brian Regan point, comedians are musicians who play the audience. The audience is their instrument. And I add to that, sometimes it's out of tune and sometimes it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
So you can tell more when a comedian is failing than someone just being like, they're coming to America.
Yeah.
Like, you can fake it more if you're Neil Diamond, is what I'm saying.
You could turn around and enjoy the rest of the band and enjoy the fact, like...
The guy on the bass is like, hey, we got into it last night, Neil. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
I'm alone.
Yeah.
Got a bottle of wine waiting for me in the hotel.
But if any of you guys go up now and it's just laying there, does it still hurt the way it did when you were younger?
It hurted. It hurted.
Yeah.
Again, Balky. It hurted. It hurts when I pretend to bomb for the show.
Yeah.
I still feel terrible. It was in the script. Pete bombs, and I go up and I'm like, oh! My back sweats, my mouth gets dry. It's horrible. It's the worst.
Well,
you bomb?
Never
bomb.
You've been bombed?
Yeah, I don't think it ever gets easier. I think actually it hurts more now because you feel like, well, I've been doing it long enough to where I should be more bulletproof. Maybe not fully bulletproof, but a decent
It is worse.
a decent level of
You can't get off and go, I'm new.
Yeah, you can't hide behind like, yeah, they're just green. You know, give them a couple of years. It's like, oh, in a couple of years, like
I blame the audience. I really do. I love blaming the audience. They say don't blame the audience. I will throw what are they there? Throw them under the bus. Don't blame the audience. Take responsibility. I will throw them under the bus.
Well, you know,
it does get them to laugh. I've seen you do that,
Oh, I love doing it in
and
real time. Yeah.
I do feel like it loosens them up.
I like keeping on top of them.
there is something that it comes up this season too, and I do believe it's true that the audience didn't used to go ooh
Yeah.
if you said something edgy, but they've going. Nobody in the audience wants to laugh at the wrong thing.
Well, everybody's on the record.
Yeah.
That's a real phenomena now. Is that like I love Bill Burr. And Bill Burr is what I think of as like the perfect guy. You go into a club, it's 1 a.m, you've had a drink or whatever, and you don't even know who's on, and out comes Bill Burr, and he just blows you away. And some of the stuff that Bill says, I would say this if he's here, I see how it's offensive to some people. You understand what I'm saying? But you go to laugh at our darkness. It's like, oh shit, you shouldn't even fucking say that. And I don't even fully agree, but I'm laughing. It's a weird type of entertainment.
It's the best kind of laughter, by the way. I like disagree with like a Nick DiPaolo point or Jim Norton point, but then they show you the logic and you're like, well, this is fun.
It's really fun. And that's almost only what Bill does.
Yeah.
So it's this weird, salty, sweet. Nothing else really gives that to you the way that stand-up does.
Yeah.
But I've said this many times, so I'll make it brief. That's nighttime you. And nighttime you, that's great. Enjoy that. That's nighttime. That's what night is for. It's like, it's dark, we're out, hey, it's fine. Then the problem is someone takes a video of Bill's set, puts it on Facebook, and now it's being shown to daytime everybody. And now it's coming up in your feed at work, and some guy at HR is like, that's not appropriate. And he's right. Because that was nighttime stuff, and now it's a daytime. And then now everybody's being held to account. It's like, what do you like this? You stand by this. You're fired. You know what I'm saying?
I think like as a woman pursuing stand-up, I think that I've wanted to explore. I mean, my style couldn't be more opposite from Bill Burr, but I've wanted to explore topics that are a little weightier and maybe heavier. And I think that one thing that holds me back from exploring those is because audiences typically tend to, I feel like, worry more about girl comedians. Like, is she okay up there? Like, you get a sense of that. And I think that kind of has stopped me from like, because I just want them to know I'm okay. Like, that's my number one goal, is to be like, I'm fine. I chose this.
You get a lot of like, oh
yeah, you do. And there are certain like little things that I try to do to combat it. This is like, so I don't know if you do this too, but like I put my hair up because I've noticed that when I wear my hair up, people are less concerned. And when I wear my hair down, they're like, look at that little lady. It's like, it's such a like weird mind fuck that you have to consider those things. And obviously, like I was saying, you don't want to focus on them too much because then you're giving it power. But I think it's a level of self-awareness that you have to take into account, because sometimes you're like, I don't know, I feel like they're nervous for me or something. And then I have to like set this tone of like, I'm good. I'm taking care of you. I'm your Sherpa. Fucking relax.
Right. Yeah, you don't really have the privilege of being super vulnerable.
Like if I went up there and I'm like, guys, come on. And then he's like, is she having a meltdown? Like, I think she's like about to kill herself. So yeah.
But you know, even the thing too of exploring the material before you get it to Netflix, right? That there isn't another art form where you're watching. Like if you would watch Paul McCartney probably put together a song, you might be like, this guy blows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He really stinks at songwriting.
Blackbird singing in the living room. In the middle of my fridge. No, I'm going to take the day off.
Yeah. But we never have to sit and watch him struggle and play the same chords
Stand-ups
over.
can't do it without an audience there. That's the horrible truth.
Yeah.
I remember when I was starting out, they were like, you could do an album. And I'm like, where? They're just like, just come over. We'll add laughs. I was like, that's, you don't know what stand-up is. Stand-up is the merging of a performer and a group of random people into a show.
Now, you guys have written material at home that you thought was great and had it walk out and be like, oh, I guess this isn't funny at all.
Yeah,
You know?
I had one recently. I can't stop laughing thinking that Elon Musk, who invented the self-driving car, when he wants food in his mouth, he has to use a fork. I tell you, it's not working. I'm telling you, I know it doesn't work, but this is what I think is funny.
Yeah.
Is that this guy is like, well, there's an algorithm that senses if there's another car, and then he's like, I want the mushroom. And then when he poops, he has to go, there's poop on my butt. Like, there's no upgrade for this, is what I'm saying.
Right. There's no like human upgrade.
There's no human upgrade.
No.
Right.
You can make a car that's like, good morning, Mr. Musk, but
Yeah.
he's still
But
like
you're still
pushing
gonna-
his shit out. Like, like he has to find the muscles, push to shit. And then he shits and he wipes and he looks at it because there's no other way to know when he's done. So there's no poop. I guess I'm done. Now, how are we going to go to Mars? Okay, I just made it funny. But
Yes. You destroyed your point,
the
Pete.
first time I said it,
Yeah.
I only had the fork part.
Yeah.
And now I have these new parts, but it did not work at all.
Wouldn't this be great if, like in Crashing season 3, this is an entire episode and it's just all worked out?
Watching a
it's all
bit
worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, I had an idea of following a weekend because sometimes you'd get a bit, you do a weekend like Thursday, 3 shows Friday, 3 shows Saturday, 1 show Sunday. You can actually watch the evolution of an act. Like by that show Sunday, you want to talk about Bulletproof. You're just like, Thursday night, you're like, hello, Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And Sunday, you're like, what's up, fuckers? Like you're ready
Yeah.
to go. And sometimes you have a couple new bits. It's called being road strong. So I think it's interesting when Pete comes back to New York in the 3rd season, potentially, there's no wood to knock.
Knock on leather.
Knock on leather. The old adage is that he could be road strong, but that isn't always what they want in a club because you're not letting people in. If you're only killing in roadhouses in New Jersey, there can be an adjustment period if you're on, Colbert the next night.
Well, that's the beauty of this show. There's so many of these little things that you can work out. Season 2, you said you were happier with it, but I think it's a better season.
Oh, thank you.
I really do. Sunday night. This Sunday night. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for having me.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.